Hello, I'm Bob the Booker and welcome back to my channel. Today I just wanted to do a sort of separate review of just one book I've read recently that I just think is really interesting, really beautifully done, and that I just really wanted to talk about. And that book is a Burning by Megha Majumdar. There will be some spoilers probably in this. Well, almost definitely will be some spoilers in this. So if you've not read it yet and intend to shortly, this may not be the video all the time for you. But I still think it's really worth checking out. So this is a book that I heard a lot of buzz about earlier this year before it came out, and I was really intrigued to kind of check it out. So it's set in contemporary India, and it follows. Woo! There we go. Things are falling in my room. That is lovely. There we go. That is the level of professionalism I give you all here. One moment. Let me just recheck things. There we go. So apologies for that. As I was saying, back to Megha Majumdar. So this is set in contemporary India, and there are three characters who all kind of intersect. It's kind of a triple narrative, and it is in kind of quite short chapters. Actually, it's very readable for that reason. It is about this one main kind of character, Jivan, who is accused of basically either supporting terrorists or committing a terrorist action in some form. So there is an incident with a train where there's a sort of fire and kind of loads of things are destroyed and people die on this train, and it is believed and sort of posed as if this kind of train incident was all because of this character Jivan, this idea that she has kind of instigated it. Now, at first, as the readers, we think, well, this is nonsense. Obviously, you know, what has she done? Like, you know, we're kind of hearing her side of the story, and she's saying this is absolutely not true. And we find out that the police's evidence against her is that she was talking to a known terrorist online. So as we learn more about Jivan's story, she's sort of telling us that yes, she was sort of speaking to this terrorist online. She did not know, firstly, he was a terrorist, nor did she know about any kind of things he was up to, and they didn't even speak about anything to do with terrorism. It was largely about sort of shopping and the weather and family, you know, kind of general topics. And so we kind of start to feel this real sense of injustice around Jivan, of just like nothing really feels right. You know, the police are kind of taking her and are kind of doing all of this. And in the meantime, we get these two other supporting characters that kind of help sort of flesh out parts of the narrative as well. So we've got Lovely, who is a Hijra woman in India, and they're all in India. This is where the book is set. But Lovely, this Hijra is, she has dreams of being a film star, and she is we sort of first see her at an acting class, and she's sort of doing these very dramatic poses and teaching herself, you know, she's sort of thinking of sad situations to make herself cry. And, you know, I mean, I love her. I was just so drawn to her as a character all the way through. I just found her endlessly charming and lovely. Her name is Lovely as well. That wasn't intentional. I just find her, yeah, so lovable. She is so interesting, I thought, because we kind of find out that Jivan, the character who's been accused by the police, had been teaching Lovely English, but all the way through, Lovely has kind of she sort of admits a couple of times that she doesn't really speak much English, and her chapters are all told in a very kind of, I wouldn't necessarily call it kind of broken English, but it's a very there's a sort of specific voice and a sort of specific grammatical mistake that comes in a lot. So every time Lovely uses the present tense, it's always the present continuous. Let me think back to when I was a teacher. The present continuous. So, for example, instead of saying, you know, I have a great family, she would say, I am having a good family, for example. I think that's the present continuous. Yeah. There we go. Rescind my teaching license if that's not. But what I thought was so fascinating about her is, I mean, like, it always feels like it's coming through in her voice, and I just found her so charming. And she's caught up in this situation because initially she gives a sort of statement and kind of speaks in court, sort of defending the honour of Jivan, sort of saying, you know, she is a great woman, she taught me English even though she didn't have to, you know, I'm just this poor woman, and she, you know, reached out and looked after me when she didn't have to, like that, you know, she teaches me several times a week, she's a good person, she wouldn't commit a terrorist act. However, she kind of then gets forced into quite difficult situations, because as Jivan's trial rumbles on and it gains more and more publicity, at the same time, Lovely is kind of seeing her career really take off, and suddenly loads of people want her after kind of a few clips of her sort of go viral. And so she's basically told that she has to make a choice between either supporting Jivan publicly or her career. You know, if she speaks out on Jivan and this whole situation, people will think that she's a sort of terror sympathizer, and she may lose all of these great opportunities she's got. And as we learn several times throughout the book, she is in an incredibly precarious situation. She's incredibly vulnerable in terms of her finances, and she has these big dreams of becoming a star, and this is her moment. So there's that kind of setup there. We also have this third character called PT Sir. I'm not sure if we ever actually learn his name, but he essentially was the former PE teacher, at least how we would call it in the UK, physical education, or physical training, I think it is in the book, for PT Sir, teacher of Jivan at school. And there's this sort of moment where we learn sort of through him that Jivan was, you know, a kind of nice, poor student, you know, a nice student at school, quite poor, but, you know, people looked out for her. There were kind of teachers who made sure that she was okay and provided her food, and PT Sir kind of sees himself as one of the people who was really supportive of her. But at one point she suddenly disappears at the end of school and never sort of is there to sort of say thank you or say goodbye even, really. And PT Sir takes that quite personally, and sort of thinks, you know, and then when he hears that Jivan is being prosecuted for acts of terrorism or supporting terrorism, he kind of starts thinking, right, this is all, this sounds about right, you know, maybe that's why she disappeared, she's actually a terrorist, blah, blah, blah. And he kind of goes down his own avenue with that. But what's so compelling, I think, about his narrative, as well as we suddenly see how he is really embedded in the corrupt element of a lot of this story. So he is given more and more power by the kind of government and by sort of one of the parties, the sort of political parties. And because of that, he also cannot speak out or do anything without being seen as potentially kind of compromising his role and his position. So in fact, he starts kind of being kind of doing the work of the government, essentially, or doing the work of that party, and doing things that are unfair. You know, he gets, again, big spoiler, he gets he creates a situation at one point, I'll try and keep it as vague as possible, he creates a situation at one point that really jeopardizes Jivan's chance at fair trial. And meanwhile, Jivan's in prison, and we see kind of things a bit through her eyes as well, which is really quite heartbreaking at this moment. What I think is just so clever about this book, and I found really interesting and really compelling, apart from the style, which is really, I mean, it can be a little bit difficult at first, juggling 3 characters, especially when sometimes chapters are, 1 or 2 pages. But what I think was so fascinating about the book was it does kind of take you on a couple of turns that you're not quite expecting, at least that I wasn't. So I kind of assumed originally that we would get a sense of, something's unfair, and then ultimately it kind of works out, or what have you. But as the book's going along, we at one point have a bit of a turn where we're made to think, wait, hang on, is this actually, is Jivan lying to us? And this, I mean, I say this not long after doing a video on unreliable narrators, but we start getting a sense at one point that she might be unreliable, because we start thinking maybe these stories don't line up, and then we realise sort of a little bit later what kind of parts of the truth are. And again, I don't want to give too much away, but there are reasons why Jivan feels incredibly guilty about things that are happening, but also reasons why she is defending that she did not do it and she has nothing really to do with it. So we have a lot of that, and we have her in prison and the people and the parents around her kind of looking out. And what's really interesting is there are sometimes chapters that are kind of interludes, or that are kind of, you almost feel the camera kind of jolting back and kind of looking at things a bit more broadly. So at one point we get the perspective of her parents after a prison visit, and that I thought was really interesting, because, you know, although that could have been dealt with within another chapter, I like that she sort of did a separate zoom out, half a page on the parents, okay, back into the prison, or back into the lives of one of the other characters. But ultimately, I think what's so clever about this book, and I say this not fully knowing, or not really knowing too much about the situation in India with politics, but I know that many people have picked up on, you know, I've heard sort of a lot of controversy that's been sort of levelled at people like Modi, the Prime Minister of India at the time of recording, and there have been a lot of charges levelled at him about corruption. So I would imagine, and I'm perfectly willing to accept if I am wrong on this, but I would imagine that a lot of this, with this being set in contemporary India, is a commentary on the current government in India. And what's really interesting about that is how there's this really suffocating tone throughout, that we get the sense that, you know, at the beginning of the book, so I'm just going to move that, so there we go. I'm going to try and not be completely covered in sunlight, as nice as that is, and as much as I probably do need the vitamin D. Yes, that so much of this kind of corruption, kind of cover-up is happening in India. For example, in the kind of, at least in this book, where, for example, the character gives an interview to a newspaper, and when the article comes out, it is completely different to what's been said. But she's in prison, and she's, you know, already been pigeonholed as this character who is unreliable and is a terrorist. So nobody's really believing her. You know, the women in the prison also think that she must be guilty, and it's just this. It's so interesting because it feels like sort of almost like the power of gossip around Jivan is so strong that anything she does is kind of seen with, it's almost kind of confirmation bias, right? Like everything she does, people are like, oh, well, I knew that about her. Oh, what's that? She cried when she was sort of sentenced to prison. Yeah, that's because she knows that she's done wrong. Or, you know, oh, she didn't cry. Oh, she's cold and she's heartless. And it's almost suffocating. And it reminded me a lot, oddly, of, or not, maybe not that oddly, of The Trial by Franz Kafka, which is also with this idea of being set around a kind of a trial happening, as the name suggests, but that every kind of card is stacked against this character. You know, people speak out and say things that are untrue, or regardless of how true something is, people want to believe their side of the story. And I think that's just what makes this book, what makes it Burning just so compelling, is that we really, it's not neat and tidy, essentially, right? It's not kind of a situation where we suddenly, you know, everything's kind of looking like it's ending well and everything gets neatly wrapped up with a bow. Instead, we watch as things get worse and worse, and seemingly there's nothing to stop it, because, you know, the characters are trapped in a situation that is wholly unfair, where, you know, the power of legal, the power of the law can be kind of overridden by thoughts and opinions and the public sway of kind of things, or where, you know, people can be persuaded not to give evidence because of their careers, which obviously does happen elsewhere as well, but just in this sort of very specific scenario is so terrifying, because you can just watch this character kind of get almost smaller and smaller, and their chances sort of shrinking with them as well. And I just thought it ends in such a beautiful and touching and powerful way. I mean, it didn't always fully work for me as a book. I mean, like, I think occasionally it felt like it jumped about a little bit, but at the same time, like, I mean, that's me nitpicking, really. This book is just, I think, is so interesting and so powerful in so many ways. I see now why there was a lot of hype around it. I just think it's really well done. And there was a section, I did highlight it. What did I highlight it for? Oh, here we go. This is a line that I thought, or kind of a section that I thought really sums up a lot of the book for me, which is from one of Jivan's chapters, which is, "Don't treat me like I am stupid, I shout. I don't know why I'm shouting. I have a voice, I remind myself. This is my voice. It booms, it startles. The country needs someone to punish, I tell him, and I am that person. And that, I think, just sums up so much of this book for me, that in this kind of there's almost so much public outrage about this situation that instead of justice being followed and the proper procedures being followed, they need to punish somebody and they need to make an example of somebody, and Jivan is that person. And it just feels so unfair, but it also just feels like such a clever commentary, because that is how, for many places in the world, including the UK at the moment, many things can go, right? The kind of trial by social media or trial by public opinion on some things, where an innocent person is hounded for years because the public just think that they're wrong. See Meghan Markle, not wanting to wade into that, the whole discussion. Some of the public outrage and like vituperative anger about Meghan Markle, it's an argument I have with my dad on a regular basis, is just seemingly just like, I don't know why there is just so much anger at this person. None of us know her. None of us know this situation. It is baffling to me, and I think a similar sort of thing kind of comes up really in A Burning, and not to compare Meghan Markle with A Burning, but this kind of really vicious trial where everyone is so set in their opinions that it just kind of becomes like a circus almost and that's exactly how this feels at parts. It's so chaotic, and poor Jivan is sort of trapped in the middle, and Lovely is offered these opportunities to either support her friend or have the career that she's always dreamed of, and we are kind of torn with her, because we also think in a world like this, in these sorts of circumstances, what else does Lovely have to fall back on? Like, if she testifies and says that her friend probably didn't do it because she's a good person, her life is ruined probably forever. Really glary here. But yeah, her life is probably ruined forever, and that's a really tricky thing. So, there's only really one option she can make. So anyway, now that I've kind of basically just gone almost monochrome, I will probably end there. But I just think it's a really interesting book. If you have read it so far, or if you're planning on reading it, I'd really love to know your thoughts. I think I want to say it's a debut as well. I want to say, because is it a debut? Yes, Burning is her first book, which, I mean, it's such an impressive debut and such an incredible book, I think. Again, probably won't be surprised to see this on a couple of prize lists this year. I'm actually a little bit surprised it wasn't on the women's prize list, but I think it will probably end up picking up. I feel like it'll be on the Booker long list, but either way, I mean, I just think it's an incredible book, and I really do think it's well worth checking out. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this and any other books that this maybe reminds you of, or that you might kind of bring into comparison with it. Like, I think, for example, The Trial by Franz Kafka might also be. Anyway, I hope everything's good, and take care and look after yourselves. Bye bye.